My twin brother stole my wedding venue and hired a fake fiancé to upstage me. You know those moments when your whole world shifts and suddenly everything makes perfect, horrible sense? Well, I had mine 3 weeks before my wedding when I found out my twin brother Marcus had booked the same venue for the same weekend in Tuscany, claiming it was Mom and Dad's brilliant idea for family convenience. But let me back up because this story really starts 31 years ago when we were born exactly 12 minutes apart. Marcus first, of course, and apparently those 12 minutes were enough to establish the natural order of our entire lives. Growing up, Marcus was always the golden child, the one with straight A's while I struggled with dyslexia, the one who got into MIT while I went to state school, the one who landed a 6-figure tech job at 25 while I became a high school English teacher making $38,000 a year, which according to my parents was me not living up to my potential. Every family dinner was a performance where Marcus would casually mention his latest promotion or the new Tesla he was considering. While I sat there knowing that anything I shared about my students or my classroom victories would be met with polite smiles and quick subject changes back to whatever amazing thing Marcus was doing. When I got engaged to Lorenzo, my sweet Italian fiancé who teaches art and makes me laugh until my sides hurt, my parents' first response was not congratulations but concern about whether he could support me properly, followed immediately by Marcus rolling his eyes and saying something about how at least someone in the family was settling down even if it was not exactly what they had envisioned. Lorenzo and I had been planning our wedding for 18 months, scraping together every penny we could to have this perfect celebration at Villa Monastero on Lake Como, the same place where his grandparents had their wedding 60 years ago. We had invited 40 people, all of whom had already booked flights and hotels, and we had paid the venue $45,000, which was basically our entire savings plus money we had borrowed from Lorenzo's family. The morning I got the call from the villa coordinator, I was in my classroom grading essays during my prep period, thinking about how in exactly 21 days I would be walking down the aisle overlooking the lake with cypress trees and olive groves as my backdrop. "Miss Sarah," Francesca said in her lovely Italian accent, "I am calling because there has been some confusion with your wedding booking." My stomach dropped immediately because in my experience, calls about confusion 3 weeks before your wedding are never good news. Your brother Marcus, he has also booked the villa for the same weekend. He says this was arranged with your family for convenience, but we are not understanding how this works with 2 weddings. I actually dropped the phone. When I called Francesca back, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. "What exactly did my brother tell you?" "He says he is getting married to someone named Victoria, and that your parents suggested having both weddings the same weekend, so the family does not need to travel twice. He has put down a deposit of $20,000 and says he will pay the remaining balance next week." $20,000 that Marcus apparently just had lying around while Lorenzo and I had maxed out 3 credit cards to make our deposit. Typical. I called Marcus immediately, and when he answered with his usual confident, "Hey sis, what's up?" I could barely form words. "What the hell do you think you were doing booking Villa Monastero for the same weekend as my wedding?" "Oh that," he said. "Like we were discussing the weather, Victoria and I decided to get married, and Mom suggested we do it the same weekend as yours. Makes sense, right? Everyone's already going to be in Italy anyway. Marcus, you have been dating Victoria for exactly 3 months, and last week you told me you were not even sure about her. Now suddenly you are getting married. Sometimes you just know. Sarah, I would think you would understand that. Besides, our wedding will be more of an elegant affair. Maybe you should consider postponing yours, you know? Let us handle the logistics since I actually know how to plan events properly." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Not just that he was stealing my wedding weekend, but that he was so confident our parents would take his side that he did not even bother pretending to feel bad about it. I hung up and immediately called Mom, who answered on the first ring like she had been expecting this conversation. "Honey, before you get upset, just hear us out," she said, which was already not a great start. "Mom, Marcus booked my wedding venue for the same weekend as my wedding." "Well, yes, but think about how convenient this will be for everyone. We won't have to make 2 trips to Italy. And honestly, Marcus's wedding is going to be quite sophisticated. Maybe you and Lorenzo could do something smaller and more intimate. You know how you are with big events anyway. How I am with big events. Like my anxiety about being the center of attention was some personality flaw instead of a reasonable response to 31 years of being compared unfavorably to my perfect brother. Mom, we have already paid $45,000 and Lorenzo's entire family is flying in from Sicily. Well, Marcus is paying more and his guest list is more extensive. Maybe you could work together, share some vendors or something. Share vendors for my own wedding with the brother who was actively trying to upstage me. Right. That was even worse when I called him. He did not even pretend to see the problem. Sarah, you need to be more flexible. This is what families do. We support each other. Marcus has worked very hard to get where he is, and if he wants to get married, then we should be happy for him. What about being happy for me? Dad, I have been planning this wedding for 18 months. Yes, but let's be realistic about the scale here. Marcus's career puts him in a different position to host this kind of event. Maybe you could do a small ceremony and then join the bigger celebration. A small ceremony. Like I was the opening act for the main event. I called Lorenzo crying so hard I could barely speak. And when I told him what was happening, he was quiet for a long moment before saying, "This is about more than the wedding, is it not?" He was right, of course. This was about 31 years of being second place. Of watching Marcus get everything he wanted while I got lectures about being more ambitious. Of seeing my parents light up when he walked into a room while treating my presence like a given. The next few days were a nightmare of phone calls and arguments. Marcus had told Victoria's parents that our family had generously offered to host a double wedding. My parents kept saying I was being dramatic and selfish, and Lorenzo's family was confused and hurt, that what they thought was a celebration of their son was turning into some weird American family competition. Marcus started texting me daily with updates about his wedding plans, the string quartet he had hired, the 5-course dinner he had planned, the photographer he was flying in from Milan, all things that made my simple ceremony and reception look pathetic by comparison. "Just want to coordinate so we do not have any conflicts," he would say, like he was doing me a favor instead of steamrolling my wedding. Victoria called me once during this time, which was weird because we barely knew each other, and she sounded strange on the phone, nervous and formal. "Sarah, I just want you to know that I think what Marcus is doing is really romantic, planning this surprise wedding. I had no idea he was so impulsive." Impulsive was not a word I had ever associated with my methodical, controlling brother, but I was too angry and stressed to think much about it. The breaking point came exactly 1 week before we were supposed to leave for Italy. When Marcus sent our entire extended family a beautiful digital wedding invitation with professional photos of him and Victoria, announcing their intimate destination wedding celebration, and casually mentioning that they looked forward to celebrating alongside Marcus's sister Sarah, who is also getting married that weekend. Also getting married that weekend? Like I was an afterthought at my own wedding. That night I could not sleep. I kept thinking about how this was exactly the pattern that had defined our entire lives. Marcus taking what he wanted and everyone else adjusting around him. Me always being the reasonable one, the one who compromised. The one who made space. I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hi Sarah. This is going to sound crazy, but I think you should know something about your brother's fiancée. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow? This is important." I almost deleted it, assuming it was some kind of spam or scam, but something made me respond. "Who is this?" "My name is Jessica. I work in casting for commercial and film projects in Los Angeles. Victoria hired me for something, and I think you need to know what it is." Jessica and I met the next morning at a Starbucks near my school. She was a woman in her 40s with short red hair and the kind of direct manner that made me trust her immediately. "This is going to sound insane," she said, "but your brother hired Victoria to pretend to be his fiancée." I stared at her. "What do you mean hired her?" Victoria is an actress, not a very successful one, unfortunately. She mostly does commercial work and background roles. Your brother contacted my agency 6 weeks ago, looking for someone to play his girlfriend for family events. He specifically requested someone elegant and sophisticated who could convincingly portray a serious relationship. My brain felt like it was short-circuiting. That is impossible. They have been dating for months. No. They have been performing for months. He is paying her $20,000 to play this role through the wedding, and then they will have a quiet breakup afterward. He told her it was because he needed to impress some business associates, but from what she has mentioned about the family dynamics, I think you are the real target. Jessica slid a folder across the table. Victoria felt bad about it when she realized you were a real person with real feelings getting hurt. She gave me copies of their contract and some of their text conversations. The contract was surreal. 8 pages of detailed instructions about Victoria's behavior, her backstory, even the kinds of clothes she should wear and topics she should bring up in conversation. It specified that she would accompany Marcus to family events, social functions, and culminate in a fake wedding ceremony for which she would receive $20,000 plus expenses. But it was the text conversations that made everything click into place. "Marcus, remember, you went to Northwestern, you work in marketing, your parents live in Connecticut, and you think Sarah seems sweet but not very ambitious. Victoria." "Got it. Should I mention the Italy thing again?" Marcus: "Yes, keep talking about how romantic it is. Really sell the idea that this is all about love and spontaneity. The more impulsive it seems, the less time they will have to ask questions." Marcus: "The key is making my parents think I am finally settling down with someone appropriate. Sarah getting married first was not part of the plan, and it is making me look bad." Victoria: "This feels really cruel to your sister." Marcus: Sarah has always been fine with being second. This is just how our family works. She will adjust like she always does. There it was, in his own words. The confirmation of everything I had always felt, but never been able to prove, that Marcus saw me as a supporting character in his story, someone who existed to make him look better by comparison. But there was more. Jessica pulled out another folder. Victoria also mentioned that Marcus seemed very stressed about work lately. She said he kept getting calls that made him angry, and that he mentioned something about needing the wedding to be a distraction from other things. What kind of other things? I do not know. But Victoria said he was very specific, that the wedding needed to be big and public, and that he needed lots of photos and social media coverage. Like he wanted proof that he was celebrating instead of dealing with problems. That afternoon I did something I had never done before in my life. I hired a private investigator. I know it sounds extreme, but 31 years of being gaslit by my family had taught me that when something feels wrong, you need proof that other people cannot dismiss or explain away. The investigator, a woman named Carol who used to be a forensic accountant, found everything in less than 48 hours. Marcus was not just embezzling from his company. He was running an elaborate scheme where he had been creating fake vendor accounts and routing payments to himself for almost 2 years. He had stolen over $800,000, and the FBI was building a case against him. They were planning to arrest him the Monday after what was supposed to be our wedding weekend. The fake wedding was not about upstaging me. It was about creating a public narrative of success and stability right before his whole world collapsed. He needed photos of himself as a happy groom, social media posts about his perfect life, anything to make it look like he was thriving instead of facing federal fraud charges. Carol also found out that Marcus had lied to Victoria about what the performance was for. He had told her it was to impress potential business partners, not to destroy his sister's wedding and manipulate his family. I had 48 hours to decide what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to call Marcus and give him a chance to confess, to call off the fake wedding, and let me have my day without making this into a public spectacle. But I kept thinking about all the times I had been the reasonable one, all the times I had made myself smaller to make room for Marcus's ego, all the times my parents had asked me to be understanding while never asking him to be considerate. I was done being reasonable. Lorenzo and I flew to Italy as planned, along with our 40 guests who had no idea they were about to witness the most dramatic wedding weekend in family history. Marcus arrived with Victoria and our parents, plus about 60 of his closest friends and business associates, all of whom had been told they were attending the social event of the year. The villa was stunning, exactly as beautiful as I had dreamed, but it was strange seeing it set up for 2 weddings, with Marcus's elaborate decorations overshadowing my simple ceremony setup. The night before the weddings, we had a joint rehearsal dinner, which was Marcus's idea and another way for him to control the narrative. He stood up to make a toast, looking confident and successful in his expensive suit, and began talking about how wonderful it was that both twins were finding happiness at the same time. Sarah and I have always done everything together, he said, which was completely untrue but sounded good to people who did not know us, and it seems fitting that we would get married on the same weekend. I could not be prouder of my sister, and I know she could not be prouder of me. The room was full of warm smiles and people murmuring about how sweet it was, and I realized this was my moment. I stood up with my own glass of wine. Thank you, Marcus, that was beautiful. And speaking of being proud, I think we should all toast Victoria, who has done such an amazing job playing the role of your fiancée. The room went dead silent. Marcus's face went white. Sarah, what are you talking about? Victoria, would you like to tell everyone about your acting career? Or should I? Victoria looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor, but to her credit she stood up slowly. I am sorry, she said, and her voice was shaking. I cannot do this anymore. Marcus hired me to pretend to be his girlfriend. None of this is real. There is no wedding tomorrow. I am an actress, and he paid me $20,000 to lie to all of you. The explosion that followed was immediate and chaotic. Marcus started shouting that Victoria was lying. Our parents started demanding explanations. Lorenzo's family looked confused and horrified. And Victoria started crying and apologizing to everyone. But I was not done. There is more, I said. And somehow my voice carried over all the noise. Marcus is not just lying about his engagement, he is lying about everything. He has been stealing money from his company for 2 years, and the FBI is going to arrest him on Monday. I had brought copies of all the documents Carol had found, and I started handing them out to the guests like party favors. The fake wedding was supposed to be his alibi, I continued. He needed to look successful and stable while he was actually facing federal fraud charges. He thought if he could make himself look like the perfect son getting married in Italy, no one would believe he was capable of stealing $800,000. Marcus tried to grab the papers out of people's hands, shouting that I was making everything up, but Victoria was still talking. telling everyone about the contract and the detailed instructions and how guilty she had felt about hurting me. My parents looked like they had been hit by a truck. Dad kept saying, "This cannot be true," over and over, while Mom just sat there staring at Marcus like she was seeing him for the first time. The evening ended with Marcus storming out of the villa, screaming that I had ruined everything and that I was jealous and pathetic, which honestly just proved my point about who he really was. Victoria stayed behind to apologize to everyone individually. She was actually a lovely person who had been manipulated just as much as the rest of us. She gave me back the $20,000 Marcus had paid her and said she hoped someday she could make it up to me. The next day, Lorenzo and I had our wedding exactly as we had planned it, with 40 people who loved us celebrating on the shores of Lake Como. It was intimate and beautiful and perfect, everything I had wanted it to be. My parents struggled through the ceremony. They kept apologizing and saying they did not know what to think anymore. But they were there and they seemed to finally see me as someone worth celebrating instead of just someone worth tolerating. Marcus did not come to the wedding. He flew back to Los Angeles that morning, and by Monday evening he was under arrest. Just like Carol had predicted, the story made national news because of how dramatic it was. "Tech executive arrested for fraud after fake wedding scheme exposed" was the headline in several major publications. And somehow that felt like justice. That Marcus's need for attention had finally backfired completely. 6 months later, Marcus was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and ordered to pay back everything he had stolen plus penalties. His tech career was over and his reputation was destroyed. But honestly, I felt more relieved than vindictive. For the first time in my life, I was not being compared to my brother because everyone could see exactly who he really was. My parents and I are slowly rebuilding our relationship. They have started coming to my school events and asking about my students, and they have stopped making comments about my career choices or suggesting I should be more ambitious like Marcus. Lorenzo and I bought a little house with a garden where I can grow tomatoes and herbs, and I wake up every morning grateful that I married someone who loves me for exactly who I am, not who I could be if I tried harder. Sometimes people ask me if I feel bad about exposing Marcus so publicly, if I regret not giving him a chance to confess privately. But the truth is that Marcus spent 31 years taking advantage of my willingness to be reasonable, to be the one who compromised, to be the one who made space. He was counting on me to do that again, to let him steal my wedding weekend and use it as a cover for his crimes, to be the supporting character in his story one more time. Instead, I chose myself, I chose my marriage, I chose the truth, and I chose to stop being the sister who always made room for someone who never made room for me. It turns out that standing up for yourself, even when it means disappointing people who have never worried about disappointing you, feels a lot better than being reasonable all the time. Marcus gets out of prison next year, and I have no idea what kind of relationship we will have after everything that happened. But I know it will be different because I am different. I am not the sister who accepts scraps anymore. I am not the twin who comes in second place. I am not the daughter who apologizes for taking up space. I am Sarah. I am married to someone wonderful. I love my job. I have a beautiful life. And none of that happened because I was reasonable. It happened because I finally decided I deserve better than being compared to someone who was not even real.